Hello everyone, this is Marcel and I'd like to welcome you to my channel. Today I'm going to be discussing the concept of love. This video may be especially useful if you find yourself still looking for love, but it may completely alter the way you perceive it, so heads up. I say concept because in a lot of ways love is relative to the individual that's feeling it. Naturally, it can be different between the genders, though more importantly is how the individual interprets those feelings to label them as such. As many of you already know, if you've listened to a lot of my previous videos, I've been through some pretty tough relationships. All the way from a woman that would passive-aggressively ignore me and deprive me of validation or attention, all the way down to women who would openly use physical violence to try and incite me to react to them in an effort to basically frame me for things I didn't do. With nothing but dumb luck and sharp wit, I barely survived my younger years. But out of all the relationships that I've been through, one thing remained in common, is that the term love got thrown around a lot, regardless of any other circumstances. Within a relationship, realize that love is a four-letter word. It is a sword, a shield, and more importantly, a tool that can be used in almost any situation. When someone wants something desperately, it's "Don't you love me?" When they're wounded and want to scorn them, it's "I thought that you loved me." When it's not going the way they planned, it's "I really don't feel loved right now." If you ever recall as a child saying the same word over and over again until the point where your mouth goes dry and it loses all of its meaning, that was a big part of my experience growing up. I would hear it so often and for almost entirely the wrong reasons. Never simply to show affection, at least very rarely so. When a person decides within themselves that they are going to interpret an experience with another individual that they have a bond with, that what they're feeling is love, I believe to a large degree that it's actually a choice. And there are really no explanations that we get other than what you hear from your parents and your family and on the TV as to what the feeling of love is actually supposed to be. They take it in as, for example, it could be that they feel safer when they're with that person. They feel security. Perhaps they simply feel a bond. Maybe they feel validated or accomplished. But when you boil it all down, is it really in of itself its own emotion, or is it a conglomerate of very different emotions piled together? Not to forget the hormones involved, though I won't go into that right now. I've spoken a lot about the hormones involved lately. During my travels, I have learned that different cultures perceive the word love in of itself in very different and unique ways. In nearly a dozen different languages, I have found rough translations of nearly half of them that directly differ from that which people interpret the word in Western countries. Allow me to give you an example. In the Philippines, when they say love, they use a term mahal. In their native language, which is Tagalog, forgive me if I'm a bit rusty, mahal na mahal kita higit pa sa buhay ko. It also fills in with the cute terms that lovers call each other, like love, hey love, sweetheart kind of stuff. When we were there, when I was with my girlfriend, that is there, we would call each other mahal. Hello mahal, how are you today? Kind of a deal. Well, we were talking about opening a business at one point, and I said, hey, let's call it, Mahal Store. And she said, no, we can't. That will never work. No one will shop there. And I asked her, why? Well, Mahal means dear, which is translated to expensive. So it's actually, we're saying that everything in the store is expensive. So when they say to each other, Mahal kita, they're saying, you are dear to me. We are dear together. Our bond is valuable. They just say that it's the same as love because they use it in the same way, but it's also the word for expensive. That's kind of an example of how the word itself is used differently from culture to culture. I've found numerous examples of that. So when I look back at my youth and I ponder what I was really thinking all of those times that I said, "I love you," was I saying it because I felt that deep-rooted emotion within myself that I could undoubtedly claim was the experience of love, or was it something else that I was interpreting as love because it's the best way that I had to label it? It was my interpretation of what I was feeling. This is one of the reasons why people that are in toxic or abusive relationships have to be so careful that they don't fall right back into the same kind of experience again, because they interpret their feelings. They get programmed after a while to say love, to feel love, to be in love, even though the experience is actually very toxic. In many ways, I've almost wondered if the very thing that a person loves once they grow into adulthood is not just what they were deprived of the most when they were growing up. This is why, for example, males without good mothers would come to a point to cling to the first woman that will validate them. Or a young woman growing up with wanting or poverty would cling to the first man who could provide her stability and support. It's completely understandable when you break down how people grow and develop that they would form concepts of what would define a good person and generally seek out those traits, whether or not they're aware of it. Shifting gears a little here, have you ever heard anyone discuss the expression of anger and say that it is not a real emotion, but rather the expression of other underlying emotions in a physically manifested way? For example, betrayal or shame could cause a person to be angry, but that expression of anger is a choice and is relative to that person and manifests itself differently between people. We all have experienced shame at one time or another, but not everyone will redirect that into the expression of anger. Let us consider for a moment the possibility that love is the equivalent polar opposite of anger. It is the misunderstood expression of underlying emotions that get physically or outwardly manifested based on the self-reflection of those involved. For example, a young man meets a woman, she validates him and makes him feel comfortable, happy, which he hasn't experienced previously. He feels really good around her, so he starts to title that as love, when in reality, what he was needing was validation, kind of a form of self-diagnosis. Then he reacts accordingly based on the parameters of that expression, and the relationship is founded on shaky grounds, which is why it fails. The same, of course, could be said from a woman's perspective for perhaps different reasons. As I said before, it's all relative. Now, the really trippy part in all of this is if it were possible to get that feeling from something other than a romantic partner, from, say, an experience, an accomplishment, perhaps even the realization that whatever needed to be filled is not required to be a whole person. Would the relationship have even been founded in the first place? Think the old expression, he or she is my other half. Well, perhaps if that person had been whole from the beginning, they might have an entirely different perspective on the situation. It's kind of a mind-blowing moment to sit back and reflect on all of my previous relationships and ask myself, why did I love them? Why did I feel that I loved them? In all honesty, I believe that it was just the pursuit of happiness. That's all that it was. I wanted to be happy, and I wasn't finding that happiness within myself. I thought that I needed to find it from other people. Women in particular And at the time that I realized that I can only be happy within myself if I choose to be. Happiness comes from within, not from other people, not from relationships, not from physical possessions. It's all a state of mind. That, gentlemen, is the moment that you take total control of your own emotions, your desires, your direction. You own all of it. Because in the end, it's going to be your choice anyway. So make it your choice to be fulfilled now. Don't spend your life striving for the love of others. Realize that you have that power, that inspiration already. Take the wheel, because from now on, you're the one that's in charge of your own life, your destiny. Beyond that, anything is possible.